Okay, first of all, you guys get the prize because here's a talk that's advertised as robots and dance. So you obviously have very well-developed right and left brains to be here tonight, and you weren't scared off by either one, so I applaud you for that. So I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes on rehabilitation robotics. So, we're talking about robots that help people. And so when you think about robots that can help people, just close your eyes and think, what's the first image that comes to your mind?
Terminator.
Terminator. Well, this is mine. So I want to show you where we are at first on making robots that are like C3PO. So this is from the DARPA humanoid robotics competition that was in LA at the fairgrounds 2 years ago. And let me see here. Looks like this. This is the robot from MIT. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about partly about automating physical therapy, and sometimes physical therapists are worried, are we going to take their jobs? But actually, we're creating jobs for physical therapists to take care of the robots that we make. So I'm interested mainly in people who have had a stroke. That's 1 out of 6 people in the world will have a stroke, and about 80% of people have arm weakness. So here's a volunteer in our lab, and I'm asking her to touch her chin. And it's very difficult for her to lift her arm. And I became obsessed with this. How do you get into this state? Why do you get to here? And is there anything you can do to prevent getting to that state? And once you're in that state, can you get out of that state? And so we started developing robotic devices in order to automate the repetitive aspects of physical training that healthcare doesn't pay for fully. So you get limited time with your therapist, so we thought we could make robots that help you get physical therapy. And this is kind of the most complex exoskeleton we developed. This man had a stroke. He's driving a simulation of a motorcycle through Death Valley, and you can see he used to drive a motorcycle before his stroke, and so you can see how engaged he is. So part of this is just about making engaging environments. The robot's also physically assisting him. So it's kind of feeling out as he goes how well he's doing, and then providing just enough assistance to help him stay on the road, but not doing too much for him. And we built this type of device, and we've studied it. A version of this we patented through UC Irvine, and it was licensed by a Swiss company, and it's in about 900 hospitals now. So it's helped people with stroke and spinal cord injury, multiple sclerosis, and cerebral palsy mainly. So how do these devices work? It's a beautiful picture of the brain. So one thing that they're likely doing, it looks like from brain imaging and from our knowledge of the anatomy and how motor learning works, but you can see here you have all these tracks that are going down into the spinal cord. So your brain has to solve this problem of figuring out which of those tracks does it need to activate to make your finger extend or your hand flex. And you can imagine now if you have a stroke and it blows out some of this white matter here, you probably learned how to use the white matter. It works pretty well. That was strongly connected down to your motor neuronal pools, down to the neurons that activated your muscles, say your finger extensor muscle. So when that's gone, there are other pathways, but your brain has to discover them. And it can't try them out one at a time. It kind of has to try like a whole pattern at once, but the only feedback it gets is by what happens on the movement. Okay, so this is called a credit assignment problem in computer science. So you have one thing, did I create more force with my finger? You could have 1 million different neurons contributing to that. So it takes a lot of time for your brain to figure that out, and the main way it figures that out is through practice. So how do stem cells come into play here? So I'm currently working with stem cell biologists who are implanting stem cells, in their case, in the spinal cord. So when one of these pathways is broken, they put a stem cell in there, and they coax it into a neuron, and it grows out. So you can imagine sort of growing out along this track here, and it connects up to the cells up there, and it connects to cells down there, so it makes a bridge. But the thought is that that is not going to help you very much unless you train that connection and understand what it can do for you. And so we're working in different animal models to build robotic devices to retrain forelimb function, hand function, in order to essentially try to bump up the effect of the stem cell. So we've become very interested in this idea is how do you deliver a lot more therapy than people are getting? So the average physical therapy session, you only get about 30 practice movements. So I had a student who was a musician, and we had a grant where we were going to study hand movement, and he came up with this idea of a glove that just measures when you make different grips, and then you play Guitar Hero, which is the third most popular video game invented, that was programmed by a UCI student. And so now you can be engaged in the game, listening to music as you try to make these different grips. So we studied this, and I'm going to show you a couple plots, but you have to have, as a researcher, you have to have some of your all-time favorite plots. And this is one for me. So we gave this to 18 volunteers who had had a stroke, gave it to them to take home. And this, on the y-axis here, it shows the total number of grips they completed as they were playing Guitar Hero. And this is the 3 weeks that they were in the study. This line is what we asked them to do. And so you can see the first week, on average, they're doing about what we asked. And then, or about here, they go take off. So there's this kind of addictive flavor, but maybe some students here know about the addictive flavor of video gaming. But Guitar Hero is a very fun game to play. But here we have now making thousands of movements instead of those 30 that you might do in a physical or occupational therapy session. And what the result of that is, if we ask, this is a scale where we ask people how much they're using their limb. And you ask on a bunch of questions about, on a scale of 1 to 5, how much are you using it to cook or do different things. And this blue group here is the one that got the music glove. This is their baseline. You can see it goes up after 3 weeks of training, and then they stop using the music glove, but it keeps going up for another month. This group just got the book of exercises, the dreaded book of exercises if you've ever gotten rehabilitation at home, which most people never do. And so then at this point, this group, we gave them a music glove, and then they were able to practice with that, and then this encouraged them transferred to using their limb more at home. So that's commercialized now. I have 2 former students who did a startup company called Flint Rehabilitation Devices. In the first year of the company, they had several thousand people call because people need this kind of thing. We're trying to sell it for fairly inexpensive, around $300. You can just buy it out of pocket without insurance. And but you have to have enough hand movement ability to be able to use it. So only about 1 out of 8 people calling had enough hand movement ability. So they came up with this idea. And at first, I thought it was kind of a bad idea, and I discouraged them. But they had this idea of making these pucks that sense how you're moving them around and squeezing them. And then they worked with this really, I would say, sort of beloved occupational therapist in North County who has run a stroke rehabilitation support group for a long time and designed about 40 exercises you could do. So you can see he's doing one in the back there. And so then they commercialized this, and now they've sold about 5,000 of these. So that's really exciting. So we're moving into a new era with this because with this data encourages people to practice, but their data gets uploaded. So we now have 30 million practice movements that have been uploaded. So we can do, hopefully, big data and figure out what encourages people to keep doing their rehabilitation and how do you optimize it. And then I'm wearing another device we're working on right now. My daughter laughed at me when she saw me. I was wearing it, but I think it's kind of cool looking, but she kind of laughed as I left the house. But what this is a Fitbit for the fingers. And I'm wearing a ring that's a magnet, and then every time you move the magnet, it rotates the magnetic field, and we're counting how much you're using your fingers. So believe it or not, there's been no studies with people with stroke. They have one good hand, and they tend to use that for everything, and they stop using the hand that's difficult to use. There's been no studies about putting a wearable tracker on that encourages them to use that hand and gives them feedback. So right now, downstairs, we're about ready to complete our first 20 people randomized to either get feedback or just the time of day with this device called the Minumeter. Okay, so just to finish up, what determines the effectiveness of these types of rehabilitation technologies for specific people? I just wanted to share a couple really fun scientific findings. Slackers. So we're all slackers, and we have discovered this and been able to mathematically model how your brain implements slacking. Okay, so the idea here is that when you're generating force with your muscles, you're always trying to reduce the amount of force that you're generating if you can get away with it. Okay, so if it doesn't create errors in your movement, then you'll keep slacking. And we actually can model that mathematically very, very accurately. And so you can all think tonight, oh, I'm a slacker, but another way to look at it is you're an Olympic athlete, or you're a highly tuned, optimized person, because we've demonstrated that slacking mathematically, in the engineering sense, optimizes your movement ability, your energy consumption. Okay, so I put the biathlon up here because these people have to cross-country ski, so they want to conserve energy, go fast, but be as efficient as possible, and then they have to stop and shoot and be really, really accurate. And so you always have this trade-off going on in all your movements about you want to be efficient, but you also want to be accurate. And so slacking helps you become efficient, and when it creates errors, your brain corrects for them, and that's how you become accurate. So that comes into play with the robotic therapy. That's the context we discovered it, because when we started using textbook controllers to assist people with disabilities, they just let the robot take over. And so what we had to do here is to have the robot be a slacker too. So the robot has to kind of slack and let the person make errors in order for the therapy to be optimized. And then the other thing is that we've discovered is proprioception. So it has a big role to play in robotic therapy. And so proprioception is the awareness of the position of your body. This was from a science museum or activity up in Canada. I thought it was kind of cool. So you can test your proprioception by closing your eyes. You can do this now if you want. And then take your finger and try to touch your nose. Okay, so you're pretty good at that. So how do you know where your arm is in space? You know that because you have thousands of sensors in your muscle and skin that tell your brain, and then it computes where your arm is. And so we recently completed a study downstairs. So here we have a robot now that's assisting you in playing Guitar Hero, and we gave people 3 weeks of training with this robot. And this is perhaps a bit too complex, but what we found, I'll just highlight a couple things. We found we could measure their proprioception by having the robot move their fingers back and forth, and they had to push a button when the fingers overlap without vision. And so we found over half of them couldn't really sense where their fingers were. But more importantly, when we gave the robot therapy, 9 patients really didn't improve from it. 9 had really good improvement, and 13 kind of had moderate. We looked at 40 different predictors at baseline about who could benefit, and the ones that really mattered was, did you have good proprioception? And it correlates in the brain, which relate with sensory motor activity in the brain. And so basically now we can take you and measure your finger proprioception and then tell you, are you gonna waste your time in doing 3 weeks of therapy? And we have another study starting where we want to try to retrain proprioception. So for the people who don't have good proprioception and aren't going to benefit, how do we retrain it? So you start proprioception exercises to move like a dancer. So Kelli will be talking about, the robots in the video games are cool. The dancing is the ultimate sort of integrative form of rehabilitation. And so we're interested in collaborating and have collaborated in the past. Just to show you 2 quick videos. This is a class I teach. I have 300 students, and they build mobile robots that have to turn this corner and go up this channel and hit the Death Star. It's like the Star Wars scene. But I wanted to show you, just to show you what UCI students are doing. These are mechanical engineering students. But also it illustrates the proprioception thing, where if you can't sense where you are, then you can't make progress, right? So you see all of these guys falling down, and they're using a magnetometer to sense north, and if that isn't working, they just leave the track and fall over. And as a conclusion, we had 100 robots, so teams of 300 students. We had 100 robots, and this is a little demo that they put together at the end of the year. Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
I want to say thank you very much for having me here. It's an honor to be in the Stem Cell Center. And also, it's really great to see all new faces here and learn about what we do and kind of start learning about what we do in the center, not only as scientists, but as promoters of better wellness. So the title of my talk, I had a medical student actually working with me on this talk this morning, and we were coming up with all these funny names. So shall we dance, right? So with no further ado, I'll move forward. So the intersection of science and dance is really important. And so we're going to talk about this in two revolution ways. One is really what is the drive between the relationship between dance and science and dance, and how can dance be a therapeutic tool, and then how can dance help science. So those are the two main focuses, but also really thinking about how can we use different rehabilitation strategies to augment and to enhance stem cell therapies. Right? So we have stem cell therapies that go into an individual, whether it's into various parts of the brain or into the spinal cord, whatever it may be, right? Even used for diabetes, right? So we need these islet cells to perform, but we also need to increase like physical function. Can we use dance to enhance those outcome measures? And so that's really what we're going to focus on today. So the background is quickly, as Eileen already said, I don't need this slide. I started off in the rodent model focusing primarily on spinal cord injury, and then went into study humans, and then followed back up. Now I'm working with performing artists and mostly focusing on the world of dance. So two aims, just to reiterate: how can dance help science, and how does science help dance? So you can see that there's an intersection between injury prevention and therapeutic components of dance. I'm actually going to really focus on the therapeutic components of dance tonight, and really focus on the idea of how dance is a healing art. So connections. So connections are required, right? So we have these stem cells, we've put them into different patient populations, we have various rehab strategies, and the hope is that they change and have this functional change. Not just musculoskeletal change, meaning that they're able to walk better, but they're able to make decisions better, they're able to get back into the community quicker, things like that. So these connections are required. So this next is a little activity, and so I promise you it would only take a minute, but I am from the School of Dance, so it's required that we actually watch dance, okay? So bear with me. If you don't like dance, you'll love it when I'm done, but I would like you, I give you a challenge. I would like for you to first watch 20 seconds, and then I want you to close your eyes, and then I want you just to listen, okay? And then we're gonna talk about what you saw, okay? This is a famous piece of work done by a choreographer that was from UCI. Okay, so normally at lectures and talks, I do all the talking, but this new way we learn is called active learning, and so we're gonna have a little moment of active learning. So what did you, first of all, you can raise your hand, what did you see? It's not a trick question too. Everyone saw something different. Someone raise their hand. Yes, ma'am.
There was a primary scene of activity in the front with the two dancers and a group behind doing a unified activity.
Absolutely. So you saw formations, right? Organization, right? What else? Yes, sir.
People representing a concept or an idea through dancing.
Absolutely. What kind of concept? Take that a little bit further. Was there a cultural concept?
Yes, a kind of cultural story or...
Yeah, a historical concept, right? Okay. Yes.
It was a mating dance.
Okay, absolutely, could be. Next, anybody else? Yes.
It sounds like they're trying to use song and music and rhythm to kind of stimulate doing an activity. I mean, that's kind of the history of chain gang songs. There's kind of a call and response and a way to kind of tie the rhythm of the music to an activity so you can be more invigorated to do it.
Right, absolutely. Anybody see anything else? Yes, ma'am.
I saw a lot of muscles working hard.
Oh, right. Very beautiful muscles, right? Very coordinated. Yes, Cameron.
I didn't really register what the people were doing first so much as just like it was all red, pink, and like it was all sort of like two tones of color.
Right, so the color, right? So all of those things are very important. And I will say to you that every single thing that you said can be therapeutic, right? For learning proprioception, right? For orientating where we are in space, right? For maintaining our physical fitness, for actually driving neural connections in our brain. So very good. So we're going to continue on. And I'm just going to show you a little bit of piece of data that's talking about in Parkinson's patients where they actually use salsa and salsa and tango in individuals with Parkinson's disease. And you can see quickly, basically before the individuals, this is actually like a 6-minute walk test, right? And you can see the difference afterwards. There was a significant difference in the individuals that participated. Now, this was a community dance. Right, so they met at a community center and they danced for 12 weeks, and you can see this big difference. So basically what changed was also their time to walk, but they gained more hand function after they participated in the study as well. All right, so therapeutic components. So you guys, we talked about that, the spatial awareness, like also the cultural relativity. We understand from Dave Reinkensmeyer's work and other people's work too that we really need to make rehab relatable, right? So if we give a stroke patient, an individual who's had a stroke, we give them a video game that it's playing, I don't know, a bunch of rap music that they can't identify with, right? Then they really want to hear something they identify with, right? So there is time and place that we have to make things appropriate for the individual. So visual stimulation, right? So that's really important as well. Emotion. So we want to put individuals in environments where we drive emotion. Now, what we do know from individuals with brain injury that we have to be very, very mindful that this is very sensitive not to drive too much emotion, right? It's because then we can cause other issues. Physical contact. Now, this is also a very interesting concept because most of you in the room don't want to be touched because you're under the age of 18, but I will say to you that, and also there's a very fine line in individuals with brain injury too. So we have a lot of individuals when I ran a pilot study that did not want to do partnering work, that they wanted to be independent, right? So they wanted to drive this independence. So physical touches can be important. And also motivation. We want to set the situation where someone's motivated. Not everyone's motivated to dance, but I will tell you that if you get up after this talk and do a little movement, whether you call it dance or not, you'll feel better. Right? So understanding body spatial awareness is also really important. And rhythmic stimulation, like you said, right? So driving this rhythmic connection, whether it's with the music, right? And we've also found in my work that actually like getting on the offbeat actually is driving something very different in the brain as well. All right, so what I'm going to focus on today is a quick study that we did in relationship. I worked with PERC as well as a few other founders. So what is cerebral palsy? So cerebral palsy is a neurodevelopment disorder, and basically we worked with children under the age of 18 in the study, and it's a small pilot study. So the research question was, can we use a form of dance? And in this study we used ballet, and can we do different types of a dance intervention and then study different gait parameters. So what I'm going to talk about today is just the results within the gait study, meaning like how well do they walk, how well were they getting up, right? Things like that, which is really important for function, right? So these individuals wanted to be they want to be in school where they could go to the playground with all their friends and be able to play and get up and do things. And also to them, on a side note, this was really important that they were able to do things that their friends got to do. So they got to come and go to dance class. All right, so how can we dance? How can dance be used as a form of movement therapy with individuals with neurological disorders? And so we use different types of, we have a gait right, Thank you to monies that we gained from different types of grants. And then also we use motion capture data and different forms of sensor data. So you can see here is a fine picture of a young individual who's high functioning with CP, but all of these individuals, in order to participate, they had to be able to walk 10 meters. And so you can see here we're in actually doing a step-up test. And this is called a motion capture situation. And so we're capturing all the movement from each joint. And then we ask them to do different things. So here they're actually doing a little step up. And then you can see here, this is part of the intervention. So we had them, we started the intervention out with stretches, and they got to wear their leotards and their ballet shoes. And it was really also, I think the one thing to talk about too is that research is not an I situation, research is a we. And this project, we brought in Chapman physical therapy students, and these are these physical therapy students. And this is also a biology double major dance major who is going to be going to medical school, right? So we're combining resources, but also combining fields. So here you can see two, they're actually sitting because we worked on posture a lot in this dance. So dance isn't always about up and moving across the floor, right? So you first have to get a base of support and gain posture. So you can see here, we're sitting on the floor and we're working on posture things here. And so really the outcome measures focused on the things I'm gonna talk about are two things. One is gait function, right? And the other is selective voluntary motor control, which we use the scale. And so I'm gonna show you really quickly just one graph. I know, scientists, we love graphs. So basically, we measured selective control on the right side and then the left side. And so you can see here that on the left side, the individual, what we want is, so you can see there's each joints, right? So we have toe, hip, knee, ankle, and the SC joint. So what we want is we want to have equal, just like this one, on all sides, right? So meaning that this individual increased ankle movement and also increased movement at the knee. Right? So this can allow, this is actually a functional difference. The other thing that happened here in this subject, on the right side, you can see kind of the opposite happened, right? So in individuals with cerebral palsy, you can, and most likely, you have like sides that are not equally functional. Right? So there could be greater dysfunction on one side versus the other. So that's why you're seeing this like difference in function. So overall, we were able, and we're actually publishing these results right now, we were able to make small changes in these individuals and make functional changes as well. So overall summary is really focusing on this idea that there is a relationship and a tool to using movement, right? To using various forms of movement. And also, I think one of the things that I always stress, I was a ballerina dancer until I started falling in love with horses. And that took over quickly. But I think one of the things is that dance is something that is very different from all of us, right? And I think one of the things that I have learned and appreciated from this kind of work is we just need to get up and move, and we have developed outcome measures that we can measure, and using different sensors with collaborations with Dr. Reinkensmeyer, we can measure changes, right? You don't have to be a professional dancer to get benefits from dancing, right? And so I think that it is very valuable. So I hope that I convinced you that dance is a therapeutic tool, and we can use musicians. The next study I'm doing, I'm trying to actually have a live musician who's actually going to spin and make live hip-hop music, because that's what my base work has found, is that individuals with brain injuries from the ages of 21 to 28 don't want to listen to the kind of music that I picked out. They want to listen to other kinds of music. So this is why you do pilot studies. And also I'm hiring a drummer, so somebody who's gonna come in, and we're gonna do offbeat rhythms and polyrhythms. And I'll be honest, I was not a trained musician, but being in the arts, I have learned so much. But also I have all of these musicians and choreographers and dancers at my disposal, right? So it's fantastic. And also visual arts, right? So using different types of video, trying to use augmented reality to give different types of feedback to these individuals. But future applications, right? The idea is that we're driving a way to measure changes that we can use within stem cell research. And change the quality of life and the function of individuals. So would not be here without the support of my school, my main school, which is Clare Travel School of the Arts, and working with Cali T2. I have labs in all of these places. I'm spread out from one end of this campus to the other, which is fantastic, so you can find me all over. But also, I really want to thank Children's Cerebral Palsy Movement for the funding for the work that I talked about tonight, and also the integration with studying with PERC, of course, the stem cell building, and all of my collaborations. And this is my lab. We're hanging out by the tree. We just got a new trailer, so I'm moving up in the world. So, yeah, that's it.
Questions for Dave and/or Kelli? Great.
I'm wondering how, if at all, you're, I know you're using stem cells mostly and you're focusing on that, but do you do anything with putting computer chips in brains?
Let's see. I work with colleagues that do that. Yeah. And the closest I've gotten is putting electrodes on the top of the brain. And what we do is we measure your brain activity that predicts whether you're going to move well or not. And then we train people to control that. So you can shape your brain activity by getting biofeedback. And then if you do that over a few weeks, then when you try to move, you can move better. And when I say you, I'm talking about people with stroke, specifically trying to open their hand. Yeah.
I'm going to take this one first because I'm here.
Question for Kelli. Obviously, you know I'm a huge fan. Just wondering if you know the effects that you're suggesting are specific to dance, or is it any type of movement? So if you engage in any form of activity or exercise, would you expect the same effects, or is there something because of the combination of emotions and hearing music, etc., that's causing something specific with dance?
Yeah, so absolutely. So I just recently wrote a grant, and if you'd like to fund it, because I think that my biggest thing is I don't know the answer to that, right? And so I think
grants.
So I think it is a combination of all of those things, because we know in traditional rehab, sometimes the same emotion is not exuded when you see these kids in the vestment, and even individuals with brain injury as well too. So I think I would hypothesize that it's all of them, right? So I wrote a grant breaking each one of those out, right? And then doing a crossover study. And so then each group would get what they weren't getting before. So the idea would be able to parse some of that out, right? And hoping that all of them have some kind of functional or cognitive improvement. And we talked about functional improvement today, but a lot of the things that I'm also focusing on is, are they able to make decisions quicker? Are they able to get back into the community quicker, right? So I think that that's a very good idea, and I hope in the future, in the next year, to be able to study that. So thank you.
Dave, can you build an intelligent robot for rehab that's going to learn what the subject is doing and keep improving it?
We have. I mean, that's part of what we do. Yeah. I'm not sure exactly what you have in mind, but each of our robots senses what the person's doing and then adapts what it's doing based on the performance of the person.
I'm asking about artificial intelligence, whether you are overtly trying to make an AI robot.
Oh, am I trying to take over the world?
I can't tell you.
We are using, actually, I am a robot. Yeah.
Hold on.
We use elements of AI in our robots to make decisions. Even in this watch I'm wearing, it's using an element of AI to judge when I'm moving my finger. Artificial intelligence. So it's manifesting, for example, in driverless cars, where you've taken a lot of sensor data and then you have to make decisions about how to drive the car, for example.
Over here.
So I want to ask both of you, how do you feel if you could measure like the confidence levels rising in both of your therapies and how that would have impacted your studies as well?
Yeah, we actually measured that. And I think we measured it for the first time in robot-assisted therapy. And what we used a verified scale, and we had two groups of people. So one, the robot helped them a lot to play Guitar Hero, so they got 80% success. And then the other group, the robot didn't help as much, and they got 50% success at hitting the notes. And then we measured, for example, self-efficacy and intrinsic motivation. And the group that gets higher success feels that they're doing better in the therapy, that they're putting more effort into it, interestingly. And they had better long-term retention of the training. And so we think it's related potentially to what's called dopamine in your brain, that when you have more success, it's known that that helps cement the memory. And so the robot, by physically assisting you and helping you move along, actually probably gives this dopaminergic effect. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
You had a graph earlier in the PowerPoint where you tracked how well they were improving, and then even a month later, I guess they had stopped therapy, but they were still improving. Did you track for any further time after that to see how things progressed, or did you stop at 1 month?
We've tracked up to 6 months, as long as we've tracked, and we see a little bit of a tail off at 6 months. So, and then it depends on the level of assistance. For example, people who get more robotic assistance actually retain it longer.
Do they follow like a stair step where if you stop for 6 months and then you gave them more therapy, did they go to a new plateau, like a stair step?
Yeah, there's a paradox right now that all the young scientists here can solve. But when you have a neural injury, it seems like you plateau. But then if you deliver another therapy, you have a little bit of residual capacity to get better. Then you plateau again. But then if you do another therapy, you go up a little bit more. And you can't go up infinity, because that doesn't happen, but you do go up measurably when you deliver. So you seem to have this little bit of residual capacity each time you have a new training technique.
And that's in stroke, and that's actually in stroke and also in spinal cord injury, both.
One last question. Sure. So which way do you think provides the best therapy? If you just continuously train them for 6 months to a year, or stop and go again? I mean, has there been a differentiator there?
You can go, and then I might disagree with you. So.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna say, like, we don't have the science to understand that, which is amazing actually. This shows you how little is understood about how it works, right? So there are some studies that show interleaving two therapies is better than just doing one, for example, for the full time. I know of a study like that.
Yeah, and then I think the other thing too is like being task specific, right? So that's something that we're really focused on, right? So, and also variation of task, right? And so, but I think the question is, we don't really know how long to do that variation or this block tasking, right? The same thing with learning. We haven't quite figured it out. We know how to tell you to study better, but I think that when the rehab that comes with neurological disorders, we're still trying to figure out, like, is it block tasking with task variation? And then what is the time frame for that?
Just to follow up on that, when a little kid is training their stem cells in order to be able to learn to walk, it's been estimated they take 3 to 4 million steps, and they'll fall like 60 times a day. So that's several orders of magnitude more than you get in rehabilitation therapy right now. And so I think we need technologies and approaches and whole systems in this translational model where people can get just more intense therapy for longer periods of time.
So what problems are you trying to address right now, later in the future? Like, what would you like to address as future projects?
Okay, I'll start with that. So I think I mentioned one, right, is to really like parse out. First of all, I love to study the brain, and I really want to know what is it, the activation of what portion of dance is really driving these changes. But in addition to that, I think that one of the projects I would really like to work on would be to promote dance as a use of a therapeutic tool throughout like school systems, right? And that's something, and also ask those questions of how we could drive it as a cognitive and a mental health change in children and high school kids as well.
Yeah, and for me, I want to continue to make gadgets that help people do better in their rehabilitation. But then I want to use the data that we're getting from the gadgets to then understand the science behind how they're recovering. And then I want to couple that with stem cell therapy, I mean, we're here in this building for a reason, and I've seen it with my, I'm involved in a study where they're getting robust regeneration of axons across the spinal cord lesion. And so it's coming, and so I want to have those devices coupled into that type of therapy to really maximize its benefit.
Other questions? Anybody back here?
I think there's some on the front.
Ah, good.
This is more for Dr. Sharp. Have you considered using other dances? As I know you already use ballet, and I think you mentioned hip hop. Have you considered other dances that could help with other movements?
Oh, absolutely, right? So one of the studies that we're working on right now is using various forms of Indian dance. And so we're looking also within different dance genres, like studying, getting the basics and understanding the basic strengths of each genre of dance before we apply it to different patient populations, right? So if you're studying various forms of Indian dance, right, you know that their weight support is on various, like the tiptoes, right? Or they're flat-footed, right? So, and then also looking at partnering type of dances, right? So Latin-based dances and things like that. So I've been doing like small pilot studies trying to see what patient populations will actually participate, right? Because if I were to take most of you in this room and ask you to do the waltz, you would look at me and say, no, Dr. Sharp, A, we don't want to touch each other, and B, we don't like your music, right? So I think that it's a very good question. So we just need to keep running trials and figure out what dance. But also, before we use a form of dance, I want to understand what the basics that we're asking the body and the brain to do while you're performing that dance. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So I heard you were interested in Indian dance, but like which ones are you like trying to incorporate in?
I knew you were going to ask that, and you're going to kill me because I'm not very good at the pronunciation.
It's okay. I've been dancing for 10 years.
So, and I actually have I have actually a resident who's an Indian dancer, and she uses a classical form that starts with an S.
S.
And then we're also studying one with a B.
Bharatanatyam?
Bharatanatyam, yeah.
That's what
See, I don't want to kill them.
I
I don't want to be disrespectful,
It's okay.
so I'm
It's
terrible.
fine. It's fine.
So, but there are three. One is a classical Indian dance that is from northern India. And then, so there's three of them, and I can pull them up on my computer. I just don't want to butcher them on camera. But so, and if you're interested, I'm always looking for dancers and people that are interested in science, and I do take high school students in my lab. But we are studying, and we're also looking for participants, if you're over 18, that if you do Indian dance, so you can plug this. I am actually running a study right now looking at balance strategies in various forms of Indian dance. So, in people under the age of 30. Yeah.
So it was mentioned before that when a patient has a stroke, some of the pathways from their brain that go to their spine are damaged or like even destroyed. So I was wondering, what's more efficient in leading the patient to recovery, just putting completely new stem cells in, or just trying to like rewire the brain through therapy to like get the brain to form like new connections, or how to like utilize other stems that go from the brain to the spine?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and that's a really good question, and that's like there are a ton of people interested in that question right now. So the stem cell stuff is just taking off right now. So we don't yet know how well it's going to work. It's very difficult to put a stem cell in the brain that can grow all the way back into the spinal cord, for example. That's very, very challenging. And so right now it's about reorganizing networks in the brain, for example, or growing from the spinal cord over a short distance. But that's a great question. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I like to describe it as, you know how we do all this like on the 55 or the 5 or all these, like we do all this road work, right? I like to describe it as that the stem cells are coming in and they're doing a lot of road work, right? They're filling in the potholes, they're reconnecting, like putting the new lines out there. And now, like, how do we make the 55 better, right? And connect to the 5, right? Do you guys all know what I'm talking about? Do you guys know what these roads are? I'm just saying, they all look at me like, so basically that's the way I describe it, right? So we're still trying to figure out all the road work and make sure that, it's like Waze. You know how Waze says alternative route, right? That's how I describe it. So these, like the stem cells that we're trying to figure out how to use Rehab plus stem cells to create these, our ways of the brain.
Ooh. All right, I'm just going to point out it's only girls who've asked questions so far, pretty much, from back here, which is an unusual circumstance. Do we have any brave? There we go. I'm going back here because it's a guy.
Question for Dr. Sharp. So through your research, have you only worked with hip-hop music, or was there other genres of music? And is there a specific genre that works better, or is it just the genre that the patient identifies mostly with?
So I think that still is to be determined, right? So I've only run a pilot study basically looking at various movement forms, right? Looking at movement forms related to hip hop and breakdancing. Also looking at Latin-based forms of music. This is all in one study. And then also evaluating like traditional like waltz kind of things. So at this point, the patient population that I studied, they preferred, right? They were preferred like more of music that was based in the hip hop genres, right? Or more of it's kind of a mixed kind of music style, right? So it's more of a, I don't know what you call it, like house and hip hop kind of thing. I've learned a lot through this kind of work. But I think what we need to ask more of is with different subject populations, right? I think that those desires are gonna change and the results might change, right? I hope that my hip hop study doesn't show that.
I saw one more back here. Anybody? No? Any other questions? Perfect.
We're from the UCI Medical Center. We're wondering how we can get some of your robots into our rehab centers, and at what cost is it at?
Oh,
for free.
Yeah. Well, we have one of them is in the outpatient unit right now, and then we just got a grant from the ICTS is going to give $50,000 to outfit UCI with the latest technologies. Very nice. And the sophisticated robots are expensive. Like that arm exoskeleton is about $60,000, but there's a lot of lower cost things, and we're going to make UCI really high tech with these sort of lower cost things. And study then, actually what Dr. Anderson was talking about, we know these things work, but then clinicians don't necessarily use them. Mm-hmm. So why is it that second valley of death? We're really interested in studying how do you get it from there to be a regular part of clinical practice.
Very cool. All right. So thank everyone for coming tonight. I'm sure that Kelly and Dave will be here for a few minutes if you'd like to come ask any questions on the side. Once again, our next lecture is, Brian, help me out. ALS February, it's on the list that's at the back of the room. And thanks again for coming. Let's give our speakers one last round of thanks.